little bit of a special program that we'll do tonight. And the title of this one is Proving God in Science. Yeah, that could be interesting. But a dilemma in the book of Genesis is that God created the world in 6 days, rested on the seventh. And of course, many philosophers and theologians would say, well, you know, that could be, every day could be 1,000 years. But the answer lies in a secret doctrine of the Hebrews, which is called, and I've heard, you know, you've heard me use this word many times, Kabbalah. Okay, and it's spelled in various ways. Kabbalah is the key that unlocks the mystery of creation. Kabbalah teaches that God is an ever-pervading energy that consumes the universe. That's what Kabbalah teaches. It's Jewish. Okay. Out of Buddhism, out of the Essenes, Kabbalah. It teaches God is an energy, an ever-pervasive energy that fills the universe. Let's go with our Bibles and go to the very first page of the Bible. It's on page 1. And you might have a little difficulty finding it. If you do, then we'll have to start a remedial reading course. Page 1 of the Bible. And in Genesis 1, okay, Genesis 1 and verse 3, and God said, let there be light. Let there be light. Now, here, this is referring to the manifestation. Light manifesting in the physical universe. God manifesting in the physical universe. And so then, if I, as a teacher, is trying to bring forth you, or you trying to bring forth another to an awareness of the right hemisphere of the brain, what would we say? Let there be light. That basically is what we're talking about. And of course, in Matthew 6:22, in talking of the pineal or pineal gland of the brain, Jesus Christ says, if your eye be single, your body will fill with light. And we took that one step further with Dr. Wilson, who says that light is the hormone secreted by the pineal gland, melatonin, is a skin lightener which can kill cancer cells. So let's say light equals God equals energy. Okay? Light, God, is energy that has no mass, no electrical charge, but can create protons and electrons. The building blocks of the atom, thus the building blocks of the universe, light. You step in whenever I say the wrong thing because you're the biologist. Albert knows all this stuff. Let's go again. Light, God, is energy that has no mass. Okay? It's probably what the Catholics say. I don't mean that. Different kind of mass. No mass, no electrical charge, but can create protons and electrons, which are the building blocks of the atom, thus the universe. That's light. Now, I don't know how many of you have heard of this, and I just became aware of it as I began to study this particular lesson. But there's a theory, and I'm sure you know it well, called Planck's quantum theory. Planck's quantum theory. It says light is transmitted in whole pieces or quanta of action known as photons. Okay, so light is transmitted via that which is known as photons. Photons are non-physical. Okay, no mass. Photons are non-physical, but they are the basis for the physical world. They are the basis for the physical world, yet they are non-physical. They are light. Interesting. Now, let's see what we got here. We got light, energy. We've got no photons, no mass, non-physical, but actually creative. They create, but there's nothing to them, but they're light. So now let's get our Bibles out and take a look at page 219 in our New Testament, and the rest of us, let's go to 1 John. We're not going to get in here to test tubes and explosions and all. We're just trying to explore and experiment ourselves and see what we come up with. All right? Okay, we talked about Planck's quantum theory, we talked about light, we talked about photons, we talked about non-physical energy and so forth and so on that has a creative power. And if we look at 1 John chapter 1, okay, verse 5, this then is the message which we have heard of him and declare unto you that God is... God is what? That's what he said. God is light. Okay? Now remember what they're saying, the scientists in Planck's quantum theory, that these photons are non-physical light that creates. And here the Bible is saying God is light. But now there's another, so we have that, there's one thing that we could say. The Bible says in 1 John 1:5, God is light. Okay. Now there's another thing here, that a photon, which is creative light, is non-physical. So then, let's go to the book of John, page 88. I think it's on 88 in your little Bible, but it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Go to John chapter 1, and let's see what we find. John chapter 1. And this is not going to be real complicated, because it wouldn't be me if it was real complicated. That would leave that up to Albert. He can go into the deeper things, not me. Okay? John chapter 1. Now let's go to verse 18. Remember here, photons are light, creative, non-physical. And here it says, no man has seen God at any time. There's no mass. There's nothing physical. It can't be seen with the human eye. Yet it is light and it creates. Okay? So we have God, in the Bible that we read, God and light. Okay, that's okay. That's good. And then we had the photon, which is light, being non-physical. No man has seen God at any time. Invisible light. All right? But, you know, there's an interesting thing, because they say the photon is the basis of all creation, that everything that evolves out of a photon of light. Albert will tell you that if you get this building up to the speed of light, it'll turn into light. Is this right? It will not be a building anymore. It'll be light. Okay? So now this photon, non-physical, no one has seen God at any time. God is light, yet it creates. It's the basis of all. It creates that which is the structures of the atom. It's the basis of all creation. Look at page 88. Well, you're on page 88, John chapter 1, verse 3. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything that was made that was made. So there it is. Light, photons are the basis of all creation. You cannot have anything made without a photon. Yet it cannot be seen. It is light. God is light. God cannot be seen. And nothing that was ever made was made without him. Okay. Interesting, anyhow. So then let's take all of this, and just for the fun of it, let's just say God equals photon. Light, invisible, creative. Let's say light. Well, let's put it over here. God, light, invisible, creative. That's what a photon is. And of course, that's what God is. God is light, God is invisible, God is creative. A photon is light, a photon is invisible, a photon is creative. Okay? Well, if we say that God is photon, light, invisible, creative, what about personality? What about person? What about purpose? What about reasoning, you know? The photon or unit of light is motivated by a definite purpose. And this amazing fact was discovered by a scientist by the name of Leibniz. He found that photons form a ray of light, and as such they always select the path through the atmosphere that takes them most quickly to their destination. They will not just follow a path. If they're following a path and see that they can go this way and get there quicker, suddenly they'll go that way and get there quicker. Intelligence. And there's another thing that Planck, who made Planck's quantum theory, made this statement, that the photons behave like intelligent human beings. Ha-ha! Intelligence. Purpose. Light, invisible, creative, intelligent, purpose, photon, God. Why not? Why not? And all of a sudden, then you have Jesus saying, if your eye be single, your body will fill with light, intelligence, purpose, person, invisible, creative. Not bad. You see, physics proves that there is a definite purpose behind the cause of the material world. But long before physics, with all due respect to Albert, discovered that there was a purpose to the creative world, this was spelled out in the Kabbalah. Kabbalah said this thousands of years before anybody uttered this through physics. The theory of relativity, Albert Einstein, provided a new fact about light. And a new fact about God. You know what it was? In a photon, time does not exist. Time does not exist. Oh, then what about evolution? Huh? Oh, so I don't believe in evolution. Oh, you say it takes millions of years for this animal to evolve into this? Well, if there's no time, it never did. It's instantaneous. Because there is no time. Yes, sir.
What did Jacob see? Jacob said, I've seen God face to face.
Right.
And then you face Peniel.
Right.
Which is light.
Right. I've seen Jacob in Genesis 32:30 said, I have seen God face to face. I will call the place Peniel, which is the source of light. Melatonin. Yes, indeed. Indeed. Okay, so then we have Einstein saying that in a photon, which is light, invisible light, creative, with personality, purpose, intelligence, there is no time. Time does not exist in a photon. Clocks stop at the speed of light. Albert is down here smiling. He's saying, you could have written this, couldn't you? Photons can go through space for billions and billions without any loss of energy at all. Now listen to this, of what I learned out of this. You might want to write this down. Light cannot be seen. It simply makes seeing possible. Light cannot be seen. It simply makes seeing possible. All right? God cannot be seen, but he makes seeing possible. There's not too many people in churches doing this message tonight, I bet you. But if you hear this, you begin to understand the reality of this intelligence we call God, which is light, which is invisible, which creates, which has intelligence, pure energy, timeless, spaceless, pervading the whole universe in purpose and action. Call it what you want. Always calling it photon. Well, what's wrong with that? Wait, why not? What's in a name? Well, how intelligent do you know that this photon is? Wonder if you get to a sweet by and by in some cosmic place and the guy opens the door and says, "Photon will see you now." Then what do? Huh? Photon will see you now, Linda. And you say, you know, I remember you now. I heard your name before. Why not? It's intelligence. It's personality. It has a purpose. It's creative. It's invisible. It's light. You call it God. You can call it photon. Why not? But I'll tell you one thing. You may not be able to prove that one. You can prove that one. You can prove that one. What science has attributed to light, the Kabbalah and the Bible attribute to God. Einstein, Planck, Steinmetz, whatever his name is, calls it photon. We call it God. So if photons, light, invisible, which create, if science has proved that this light has a definite purpose and intelligence, and if 1 John 1:5 says God is light, then maybe science has proved the existence of what we call God. Just a different name. Huh? Intelligent, purpose, personality, invisible, creative, light. We call it God. They call it photon. They have proved the existence of this thing that you have searched for all of your life. Ah. So what we have just done then is used science or logic to prove mystical insight or intuition. And you see how important both are. Intuition, mystical insight. And we seek different ways through meditation or whatever for mystical insight. And that reveals the light. That creates. But logic validates it, proves it. So you go to church all of your life and you're told this is God. You never thought that the scientists would agree with you. Well, I don't call it God, I call it photon, but it's the same thing. That's right. Oh, yes, it does create. It creates the entire universe. Yes, it does. Oh, yes, it's a personality. It has a purpose. It has an intelligence. Oh, yes, it's invisible. Oh, yes, it's light. Yes, it is. It matches everything. But we've never talked to each other about it. And yet they've proved the existence of this very thing. Very thing. Religion uses the Bible and their beliefs and refutes science. Most of the time, religion and science are this far apart. I heard some guy not too long ago on the radio saying that years ago they would go up to a scientist and say, "Do you believe in God?" He'd say, "No, I'm a scientist." Now you go up to him and he said, "Do you believe in God?" "Of course, I'm a scientist." Because now they have found out that this thing that they were both talking about indeed is the same, God. So if we use logic or science to work with mystical knowledge instead of against it, we can create the total world of proof to humanity and ourselves. We can prove the things of God. See, you can prove the existence of photon. You can prove it. You can prove its creative purpose and intelligence. It's invisible. It's light. You can prove all of these things, and you can sit down with the Bible and say, this is how the Bible describes God. This is how the scientist describes photon. Then it would appear that God and photon are one and the same. The Kabbalah is very important to science, and the Kabbalah has a system that is both scientifically physical and mystically invisible. And let me show you what it's called. In other words, this in the Kabbalah would please the scientist because it's scientific, like we've been talking about, and it's mystical. Both. In other words, it takes you in a place of a nirvanic experience mystically, and yet at the same time it proves the case as we've been talking tonight, and this is what it's called. Tree of life. That's what it's called in the Kabbalah. It's called the tree of life. The Bible promises this wisdom to solve disease. It promises to solve the mysteries of life itself. If you'll overcome the lower traditions of your own ego, and if you'll overcome the lower traditions of religion, you come to the tree of life, and then you not only take a mystical journey of spirit, but you prove it. What the heck is the good? And you know how far you've gotten with religion. They said, oh, if you accept Jesus, this will happen. If you pray to God, this will happen. And you can't figure anything has happened. You don't understand how it can happen. There cannot be anything of God if you can't understand it. It's not possible. It wouldn't be. Say, you may not be a scientist to understand the molecular structure of what happens, but you know it happens. You know that the tree that's blossoming with its leaves now very soon will not have any leaves, and gray will return, and the earth will freeze, and then it'll come and it'll be green again. You don't maybe understand the molecular structure of how all this works, but you know it does. You can prove it. In the same way, you'll understand that there is a scientific principle at the bottom of all of this God stuff and all of this religion stuff, which is provable. And that's what Shakyamuni Buddha said a long time ago. If you can't prove it, drop it, because it's not true. This whole thing is based on faith in what? faith in that after you die, good things are going to happen. That's not what Jesus Christ said at all. He didn't want you. He said his faith on your part was simply to trust him to do what he said so you could put this thing working inside of you and reach this point. Scientific and mystical. Revelation 2:7 says, to him that overcomes, I will give to eat the tree from the tree of life. You have the proof. You'll have the understanding. And the tree of life was not, no Christian ever questions it. Where did it come from? Where did the term tree of life come from? It's out of the Kabbalah, which is out of Buddhism. All mysticism. Now, the tree of life is based on the harmonious union of opposites, which is science plus spirit, opposites. Together equal manifestation. Okay? An understanding of why this is. Spiritually, scientifically, together, the manifestation in life as to how this happens. Anstel logic is this. Everything has an opposite. Positive, negative. True and false. Good and evil. Now, the Kabbalah opposites are different. They're harmonious in balance with one another. In other words, I want to be on top. But you realize that you cannot have a top unless you have a bottom. I want to be in the light. But there are times I have to be in the darkness. And so everything is harmonious. Positive and negative complement each other. And as a result of their union, we find out that it's a creation of God. Because if there's no evil, how do you know what good is? Huh? If there's no red light at the corner, how do you know you're supposed to stop and not going to have an accident? And so these negatives are not in the Kabbalah negative from the standpoint of bad. They're part of the balance. They're both part of the same. It's like a seesaw. Positive is here, negative is here. But you can't just have one half. If you're going to have one half of the seesaw, when you sit on it, you're going to crash. It's got to be balanced. It's got to be balanced. Did you ever hear of Aristotle? Aristotle logic contrasted with Plato. And I'm going to read you about Plato. Plato conceived creation as a Kabbalist. These are the words of Plato. Now listen very carefully. God, all perfect ruler of spirit, beheld non-being, as it was called later matter. He found it lifeless and chaotic. He desired all to be good. He looked at spiritual ideas and framed a material world. That's what Plato said. He looked at spiritual ideas. Photons created an atomic universe, a spiritual world, all right? He created lesser gods, Olympian deities, Zeus, Apollo, Athene. Then he created beasts, birds, fishes. He bestowed on each an appropriate soul. Come on. Did you hear? He bestowed on each an appropriate soul. Now listen to this. Last, he poured what was left of matter into the cup which he had mixed. The world's soul, and from this mixture of soul and matter, created human souls. So there Plato describes the fundamental unity of everything that is. Aristotle logic was completely opposed. It's like religion. God is there, you are here. Plato said, if you are here, God is here. And the Aristotle logic is the logic of religion. God is out there, you're here. But Plato said, no, can't be. If you're here, God is here. Has to be. Can't be any other way. So the Kabbalah reconciles contraries and opposites, and they unite for the purpose of manifestation of life. So Kabbalah is intuition, logic, a harmonious union of science and spirit. And the Bible supports this, because in John 1:14 it says, and the Word, which was spirit, right, was made flesh, which is science, and dwelt amongst us. In other words, that which is the invisible, that which is the creative essence of God, dwells inside of the human being, and that which is spirit then becomes science. That which is spirit becomes matter. A scientific writer by the name of Ouspensky wrote a thing called Tertium Organum, and he said, we shall grasp the separate ideas concerning the spirit world in which we really live. The application of this instrument as thought gives the key to the mysteries of nature, to the world as it is. Now that's the beautiful part as we struggle with something like this, what we learned tonight, and what we've looked at tonight. How much we don't know. I would dare say very few of you that are sitting in this room tonight ever, except maybe for one or two, ever even conceived of the identity of such a thing called photon. You're walking out of this room considering, is God a photon? Is a photon God? You never even heard of a photon before. And yet, of all the prayers you've uttered, of all the things you've said, of all the books you've written, read, of all of the studies you've made, never in your wildest dream could you consider that this which science says, yes, is the creative cause of intelligence, and yet the life block builder of the entire universe could be the essence or the actuality of God itself. And that's beautiful, because it simply places the entire thing right here and says, there's nothing supernatural. There's nothing out of the ordinary. This is very natural, very beautiful, very ordinary, and yet this is the essence of God, light. To me, these types of things, and I guess they get a little bit complex. But on the other hand, what are you looking for? Are you looking for just to say, I'm going to come to church and I'm going to kneel and hope and pray to something? Much better to be able to step into something like this and begin to understand how it works. That's all you've done. You've taken a very short step in beginning to look at how the universe works, what your part is in it, how you function within it. Okay. Thank you.